Hi, Environmental Science. Celeste back here with you. I'm going to finish the presentation, kind of going through that for you so then you can watch this at your own time and use this to work on the study guide and you kind of get through the material for this unit. It's just a weird unit. Not a weird unit. It's a weird few weeks because we are in and out of the classroom, and I just figure I'm going to put this out there for you because I don't know where we're going to be from day to day. So I will see you guys in class later today. It's Thursday, but let me get going on this. All right. So we left off at our last video. I'm moving my mouse around. I'm trying to move this. Sure, let's see. So we left off on our last video talking about Rachel Carson and her book Silent Spring. I'll move my picture in just a second, but yeah, this is something that was done. They sprayed DDT. Look at the kid right there in the DDT. They sprayed DDT over swimming pools and things like that. So these pesticides were pretty pervasive in the community, and they were became known as persistent pollutants. They resisted normal environmental degradation, so they kind of stuck around, and they caused some big problems, which we'll talk about later. So biodegradable pollutants, these are things that decompose over time, and it's probably better for the environment in the long run. They don't keep causing problems. Let's see. So because of chemical issues, pollution, overhunting, things like that, many species like the whooping crane nearly disappeared from the wild due to overhunting and habitat loss, and then that raised the awareness of the problem of extinction. Interestingly enough, I saw a headline this morning that the Komodo dragon is in danger of extinction. So anyways, elevated rates of extinction reduces the biodiversity or the variety of species found in a habitat or ecosystem. We've talked about that in biology as well. Okay. So this is a book, I'm going to move my picture out of the way, that came out in the 70s by Dr. Paul Ehrlich. He was a professor at Stanford, and this book was kind of instrumental in people looking at population. Later on in this course, we're going to look at some of the arguments of overpopulation and discuss. You guys are going to decide for yourselves if you think the world is overpopulated or not. There's different arguments, so we're going to take a look at both sides of that. But regardless, rapid increases in the population size of countries like India and China, those caused fears of human overpopulation and famine. So that's your definition right here, a scarcity of food. And so here's a quote from the book. Paul Ehrlich is kind of worried about feeding the millions of people on the planet, and billions now. And he was saying that hundreds of millions of people are going to starve to death. So we'll look at some data later on as we go through this course to see what you guys think about that. Here's another famous environmental disaster called the Love Canal. This was in New York. So these are homes that had to be abandoned because there was a massive chemical waste dump site. It happened to be near an elementary school too. So hazardous waste, that's the definition for you right there. Compounds that are especially dangerous to the environment and human health. We have some of that here in Reed too. I actually worked right behind the high school over at a Superfund site. So we'll talk about what that is later too. So here's some laws and regulations kind of governing our environment, and these were passed in response to the modern environmentalism movement. So we'll look more at these laws and acts as we go through the course, probably toward the end of the year. But Safe Drinking Water Act, Clean Water Act, Clean Air Act. This is called RCRA, Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. And actually that's some of the funding for the cleanup over what used to be Baxter. It's now Pacific States, came from RCRA, and then also Superfund. And Endangered Species Act, and then also the EPA was created. And they enforce these and other laws. So this is another era of environmentalism, and many of the same environmental issues persist today, even in the post-environmentalism era, or whatever you want to call it. That's what your text is calling it. So, we have a lot of issues. We have global warming, people worried about population, water scarcity, resource depletion, loss of biodiversity, you keep going, hole in the ozone, all of those things. So there's still a lot of issues. And one of the biggest challenges we have is dealing with environmental issues in developing countries. The definition for that is those countries that haven't fully industrialized. So these countries have a lower GDP, they have higher total fertility rates, and lower life expectancy. They also have fewer environmental regulations and worker protections. We'll look at a lot of these in the future as well. We're going to look at some economics of the environment pretty soon. Let's see if I can get my picture out of the way for you. All right, so compared U.S., Japan, India, and that's Haiti behind my picture there. So the life expectancy in the U.S. was 79 years, and this data is a little older. I think our life expectancy has actually dropped a little bit since these numbers came in, but Japan has the highest. India and Haiti are both in their 60s. So the fertility rate, this is the number of births, live births per woman, almost 2 in the U.S., closer to 1 per woman in Japan, and then higher in Haiti and India. Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. They just had another big earthquake there too, so these guys are struggling. And here's the GDP. You can see the gross domestic product per person. Haiti's really, really low. They also use very little energy. They don't have the infrastructure and development there like we do. We use a lot more energy, so you guys are going to look at your energy use in this course as well. They also produce less waste, 0.2 of a ton of CO2 versus our 17 of a ton. So, you know, we have a higher rate of consumption and the use of natural resources. So, I can't make my little picture image any smaller. So economics and the environment, they're linked, and that was one thing I really wanted to look at this week. So supply and demand predicts that the cost of a resource will increase when demand is high and supply is low. We're seeing that in the construction industry with lumber right now, and lots of other things as well too, that COVID's kind of caused a backlog, and we have a lot more demand than we have things available. And so here's just kind of the worldwide demand versus price per barrel of oil. And so I think we'll look more at the economics and the environment next week when we're back together, hopefully, and kind of get going on that. I have some fun activities. I just don't want to do them online. All right. So another important economic idea is a cost benefit. So that's does the benefit justify the cost? Or does the end justify the means? So many companies, they use labor in these developing countries to reduce their own cost and then also reduce the price tag for us. So one thing we really are going to look at is these hidden costs that they're not reflected in what we pay for the items. So next week, I just pushed it back. We're going to look at where our t-shirts are made. So be prepared when I see you guys next Monday. We're going to be looking at where our shirts are made, and we're going to make a little table and kind of compare and talk about some of those hidden costs. So the workers in these countries, they often face dangerous working conditions. You can see a garment factory that had collapsed there because they don't have the same building codes there. They cut costs and things like that, and we see that often around the world. Okay. So a good example is in 1984, there was a pesticide factory located in the town of Bhopal, India. These are all the people that were killed. So the regulations, protections, and inspections were really minimal, and the chemicals that leaked into the air killed a lot of people, thousands of people, and then also injured over 550,000 people. Those were just what was reported. So settlement of $470 million was reached by the Union Carbide and the Indian government, although $3.3 billion was claimed in damages. So this is, I added this, there was this, they called it a prank, but there's a group called the Yes Men, and their gist is kind of to hold corporations responsible. And so they performed an elaborate prank. Just trying to see if I can see my time. and they wanted to increase the awareness of the Union Carbide disaster. So I'll let you guys watch this on your own. I would watch it. So basically the gist is this guy, he's not really the Dow chemical company who's the owner of that factory, not the spokesman for them. He's masquerading as that. The Yes Men actually made a website that looks like Dow's website, and so BBC contacted them and they actually interviewed him. They thought they were interviewing the real thing, and in this interview, this imposter, or this guy, he accepted Dow took full responsibility and offered to pay a lot of money. So after this interview was aired, I think it was something like crazy amount, $2 billion, Dow's stock just tanked. They lost it temporarily. And here's the backstory. I thought some of you guys might be interested in the backstory of the Yes Men and the high-level pranking. But really the goal was to call out kind of this environmental and worker safety issues that are happening around the world that we don't even realize about, those hidden costs. So that's why I included this. I thought you might find that interesting. And ecological footprint. So we're on to another topic already, just trying to cram it all in this kind of introductory slideshow, and we'll go into a little bit more of some of these in the future. But an ecological footprint is just the impact, our impact on the environment. So basically the amount of land that's needed to support like your latte that you buy in the morning, or your dinner, your beef. So we're going to look at something like that on Tuesday, but then we went out. So hopefully next week we'll kind of do a catch-up week and do some fun activities, kind of looking at our real impact on the land that we don't even think about. So if developing countries became industrialized and matched our resource consumption, scientists or projectionists have estimated 3 Earths would be needed to sustain that. So there's some worldviews that, there's 3 perspectives that we can talk about. The people take about how we should deal with pollution and overcompensation and overconsumption and the loss of biodiversity. So the first view is the planetary management worldview, and that takes the perspective that humans should manage the Earth's resources to the maximum benefit. It's like everything would be balanced. The next view is a stewardship worldview that also believes humans should manage the Earth, but in a more sustainable way. So as this is anthropogenic, but it has more of an emphasis on living in a way like that our needs could be met indefinitely. So that's kind of the definition of sustainability. So there's the stewardship worldview, and then there's the third worldview, kind of philosophy. So the environmental wisdom worldview believes that we're totally dependent on nature, and we should preserve nature as much as possible. I cannot talk. To maintain our own species. And here is a temple in Thailand where orphan Bengal tigers and their offsprings are cared for. So this is kind of an example of that. So this would be considered an ecocentric worldview, and that emphasizes sustainability for all species. You guys looked in the Hetchy assignment at the anthropogenic or anthropocentric and ecocentric worldviews and kind of compare them. So this is just kind of another example of that. Wouldn't that be cool to go there? Field trip, Thailand. Let's go when COVID's over. So each of these worldviews acknowledges that Earth is a closed system. So we have what we have, and we can't make another Earth, right? So stuff doesn't go away. We talked about that in chemistry. There's no way. So this is something that forms that basis of like, how are we going to solve it? If there is no way, we got to figure out what we got here. So that is the end of that. So I'll see you guys in class. Thank you.